Hello and welcome to another edition of the Forza Napoli podcast. I am your host, Joe Fischetti. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. On today's episode, we are going to talk about the ritiro at Dimaro. We're going to talk about some of the mercato moves that have happened recently, and then we're going to take a look at some starting lineups if the season were to start tomorrow. And I am joined by a couple of guests to help me out with that. First, I will go to Vincenzo Bertillo. Vincenzo, welcome back.
Glad to be back, Joe. Excited.
And yeah, it's for both of you guys. It's your first video version of the episode for those of you who are watching on on YouTube. So it's a treat for you all. Gianluca, it's not the season premiere, but again, video premiere for you.
Yes, happy to be here too. And I must say we got something going here. Looks good.
We got the color coordinated too. This is just magic. It wasn't planned, nothing like that. It's just destiny.
Exactly. It's I always say this is what Napoli does to us. It's there's probably more bald Napoli fans. I mean, hopefully the younger generation with the recent success we've had, they're going to keep their hair. Evan will keep his hair. But let's get started with Dimaro. We finished now. We're recording this on Monday, so Dimaro has been completed. I think they got 2 days off before they go to Castel di Sangro. Maybe we can start with the friendlies against Arezzo and Catanzaro. We lost 2-0 to Arezzo, which we can get into, whether that actually means anything. And then we beat Catanzaro 2-1, which is also, you would expect to do better against S7E3 teams. But maybe, Vin, I'll go to you first. Should we read anything into these results?
For me, not at all. I mean, it's just a training exercise as far as I'm concerned. Conte has a winning mentality, but I don't think he looks at these games as the goal is to win. I think it's more the goal is to experiment, test out the coordinations between players, a little bit of chemistry, maybe test a couple players. And obviously, we know that Conte is notorious for how hard his training is. We've all seen images of the Bruyne joking around and falling to the floor and other players collapsing. And, I've seen videos of Neres, I think the day before the Arezzo game, if I'm not mistaken, where he was like practically unable to walk down a flight of stairs. So when the players are going through the paces like that, you don't expect them to be anywhere remotely close to top condition. So not at all. I mean, even last summer, we didn't have always the best games and results in training, and we won the title. So,
yeah, and you can also look at, I don't know if it was last season. It might have been you, Vin, that mentioned this offline, that Milan was beating teams like Real Madrid in preseason, and they ended up finishing 10th in the league. So, yeah, you definitely can't read too much into the results. And I completely agree with the training. I think people really, especially, I would say, I think most Napoli fans get it, but I subscribe to the Italian football podcast and they do great work, but they were kind of especially focusing on Kevin De Bruyne, for example, and yeah, okay, he he looked a little bit slow or whatever, but first of all, he's never trained under Antonio Conte, so he's probably feeling that. And then also, De Bruyne has never really been, especially at this age, he's not exactly the fastest player to begin with. Like where he excels is with his vision, his passing, it's just his football IQ. John, do you have any concerns at all with any of these players' fitness, including De Bruyne?
I mean, at this stage, no. I mean, it's the first 10 days, that they've been training together and they're doing, intense practices. So, for now, I mean, it's no cause for concern. And it's kind of in line with how we looked last preseason with a much more, not as deep team, or at least a team that's not as, this deep at the stage of Dimaro. So, I don't think it's anything to worry about. And like you both said, Milan was beating teams like Real Madrid last year while we were, skating by in preseason, and they just beat Liverpool. So I think everything is lining up again. So no problem by me.
Yeah, again, I don't think there's a whole lot to be concerned about. One thing, sorry, go ahead, Ben.
I was just going to say, I listened to the same podcast as you, and it was more his physical condition that they were commenting on than that he was slow or anything. But like, I don't know. And I love the pod. Nima's great. Carlo's great, but De Bruyne has never been like the greatest physical specimen. He doesn't look drastically different from the way he's looked in the last 3-4 years to my eyes. So I think it's just, they probably haven't watched that much De Bruyne probably in the last few years. And you see him come in, he might have gained 4 or 5 pounds since last season. And, you're looking at him like that, but he's just never been that guy. I don't think he's even that so slow. It's just, he's never been a physical specimen of a player. It's his brain, like you were saying, it's his vision that is otherworldly, and that's
kind of like a Pirlo
in
the way that he moves around in the field, where he's not going to beat you in a foot race, but he might, turn you around or, just lose you on a simple touch. But
or
like you
pick
said,
out
he's never
a 30-yard pass or something.
Yeah,
right? Like
he's
get it
never
on
been
first,
like a guy that you look at him and you're like, that's peak physical, conditioning in soccer. He was very frail when he first went to City from Chelsea, and now he's just kind of an adult guy. Like like he's not really a very physical specimen.
I don't even think he looked that out of shape. Like, okay, like maybe some of the angles that they showed during the match, but like I watched his press conference and they did like the jersey presentation with Man after the conferences. He looked normal to me. I don't know.
If only we were that out of shape, right, guys?
Yeah.
To me and one of those kids.
yeah, exactly. That's probably what it is. It's these the way they cut these shirts these days. But the only thing actually that concerned me from the friendly was when Luca won the penalty kick, and I thought, oh my god, here we go. And then he took the ball too. I was like, just hoping that it wasn't supposed to be De Bruyne taking it, but it seemed like it was. I don't know. I guess they left it to them to make that call. One thing I did notice, and because we this week during Dimaro, we got all the press conferences for all these players. I mentioned De Bruyne. They had Noah Lang, Marianucci, Bokema. Was there any other ones? I'm trying to think. I think that was probably it. And it was that in itself was really interesting to see, like the different personalities. Like Noah Lang, not surprisingly, given his music persona and the position he plays and the way he plays the game, was like uber confident. Oh, Lorenzo Luca was the other one who had his press conference. Actually, what I thought was kind of ironic was that the most humble and what seemingly the least confident is like the best midfielder or one of the best midfielders of this generation. Whereas you have all these young guys that were like uber confident and really haven't done much yet. I don't know if you guys took that away from the press conferences.
It felt that way. I mean, he was definitely really like soft spoken, but also too like besides Lang, he's one of the only guys that needed a Pat Kendrick translating for him. But he was very, kind of as he looks on the field, he's very like kind of humble and smooth and wasn't really, saying too much. He was complimenting the team a lot, complimenting the organization a lot. So it's like, you love to hear that. And he doesn't give the impression of he's someone to just, talk from the side of his mouth, given on how, honestly, he reacted to Tancredi Palmieri and called him an idiot or a stupid or something like that. That was a gold token by him. But I liked it a lot, compared to everyone else.
Yeah, for me, I mean, De Bruyne, all of them, it's like you said, Joe, it's just a reflection of their unique personalities. De Bruyne he's that guy. He's a serious, professional. He's a softer spoken, humble guy who doesn't act the part of a superstar. And that's just the way he's always conducted himself throughout his career. In England, I followed him, in his early days at Chelsea. Then he went to Germany, I think Wolfsburg, and then he went to Man City for the last decade. And we've seen him blossom into, probably the last great number 10, really, we can argue, even though he's, we'll discuss his position and how he plays in like 9 different positions, but he is kind of the modern number 10. I think that's his personality. Noah Lang, he has a music career. He's outgoing, he's a showman, and he's a flair type of player, and so his personality is like that. Luca is, doesn't have much of a great, personality. But I've seen, people were commenting, oh, he's a bit dumb or he's a bit whatever. But I've seen him in multiple interviews, and that's just the way he is. He's just like that all the time. So I think each one, you just kind of saw who they are as people, and that's cool. Like it's nice to have a mix. But one thing that I think all of these guys shared amongst, from Marianucci, who's 21, to De Bruyne, who's a veteran, they all really want to be a part of this project, and you could tell that this was their first choice. And to me, speaking about De Bruyne especially, the fact that for what he's done in his career at 34 to choose to come to Napoli, that to me speaks more than anything that he could have said, because he could have gone to MLS, he could have gone to Saudi Arabia, made probably 30 million a year or whatever, or he could have even gone maybe to some other teams in Europe. But to choose to come to Napoli shows me more than anything that he feels he has something more to give at the top, and he came for that reason, not for money. He came for glory and passion, and that's the only reason why he's here.
Yeah, I think it's the same reason that Antonio Conte decided to stay, and that is that there is a legitimate project there. And we've seen it with how quickly they've acted on the market, how much money they've spent, the discipline to hold off on selling Osimhen, but still spend money. In the past, we might not have bought anyone until that big sale was made. And this time around, obviously, commitments were made to Conte, and that's kind of like the Conte effect, if you will, right? He gets owners to do what he wants. The personality that I think I enjoyed the most from those press conferences was Bokema, where he just seemed, to your point, Vin, like they all seem very happy to be at Napoli, and that's something you always want as a fan. You want players who want to be there, obviously, but he was just smiling the whole time. I thought he handled himself really well and really professionally, especially when they were asking him about like Dan and Doy, who he said is a close friend of his and he talks every day, but he didn't really get into transfer rumors. At the end, he pronounced his name for everyone. He was the one that, of the other than De Bruyne, I thought was he's still confident, but the other guys were almost borderline arrogant. Even like you had Noah Lang at the player presentation comes out and he's dancing to his own music. I don't think that's arrogance, but he also said, he talked about how he likes to take on players, and whether he's defended by one player or two players, he's still going to get past them. He's that confident in his own abilities. He mentioned how when fans are watching the game, they're kind of sitting back, and when he gets the ball, they're going to lean forward, right? They're getting ready to watch what he's going to deliver. Marianucci was asked, what posters? It's like a favorite Italian journalist question. What posters of players did you have on your wall when you were growing up? It's like, who was your hero or whatever type question. He's like, I didn't have any posters, just myself. It's like, okay, settle down.
I would say Jessica Alba from Sin City.
Right? Shakira.
And then similarly, like Luca was asked, what defender I don't know if it was on Napoli or just what defenders
in training. I think it was.
Yeah, and he's like, none of them.
Yeah. Buongiorno was licking his chops to get back in there.
Yeah. I mean, Buongiorno shut down Osimhen. I think he can handle Lorenzo Luca, but at the same time, especially for the striker, you want them to have that kind of confidence, right? Like you want them to be arrogant even and wanting to take shots and all that. So I mean, I think it was all in good fun. It's always good to kind of get to know the players that are new to the team. Speaking of players that are new to the team, and I know Gianluca's been savoring this opportunity. We have a new goalkeeper. Vanja Milinkovic-Savic has signed from Torino. I think it was was it a loan with option to buy? I know in total it was like 21 and a half.
I believe it was obligation.
Obligation, yeah. but it is a loan, or there's payment installments. I think that's partly why, because his option, like his buyout clause, I think was 19 million euros, but Napoli were willing to pay a little bit more to be able to pay in installments or something like that. And that's like I don't think any Napoli fan will deny that this is good for the team to have
Yeah.
two
And that says a
starting
lot in
quality
itself.
goalkeepers.
Just just the move, like how you said, the clause is 19 and a half. We're paying 3 million more so that we could spread it out, maybe what, over 2 years, if that. We really want this guy, like that. It says a lot, and it's a very curious situation we're in. Like it goes without saying that Meret is champion of Italy 2 time. He's a solid keeper. Uh, but I think Meret is one of those guys that is as good as his defense allows him to be. Like when we have the best defense, he is capable of being a great goalie and making the difference. And this year, because of how he won 1 point, every muscle that was moved on the field mattered. So there was no like this person mattered less than the other. Every single player mattered on Napoli this past season. The year we won with Spalletti was a different story. Osimhen and Kvaratskhelia said we're winning the league. Everyone, you could mess up, you could make mistakes. It doesn't matter. We're scoring, 100 goals. So, the league was completely different that time around. But I like Milinkovic-Savic. This guy is a freak. Last season he did amazing. I think he led the league in saves. I don't know how many, but 10 clean sheets on a Torino team. Like, Meret at 17 with Europe's best defense. Well, better. I do think that, Vanya is the type of goalie that he could have, put up 17 close to or better. I don't know if Meret's the type of keeper that could do 10 clean sheets on a team like Torino. He's a great goalie, but, he's not the type of guy that, you feel like, yeah, like we're safe. We got this guy in goal. Like, we're playing a tough team. They're going to pepper us with shots. And, we got this guy in goal. Like, he's a good goalie, but like, like when you're playing in Champions League against like a Real Madrid type of team and they go on that tear in the last 10 minutes of the game of just, letting off shots at goal. Is Meret the guy you want or Vanya? I guess we'll find out this season.
Yeah, the one thing that, like I said, you can't deny it's good to have two starting quality goalkeepers. The one risk is that you end up with this kind of competition, and both guys want to play. And Vin, do you think that could potentially hurt us in any way to have that type of competition? Like, when we had the whole Meret Spina situation, it kind of felt like sometimes it feels like you're better off having a clear number one and a clear number two.
Yeah, I mean, well, in that case, Ospina ended up winning the battle, and he played great for us. And then we also knew that Meret was there. So I don't think that it can really hurt us on the field because whoever's playing will be who the coaches feel are best at that time. What it could hurt is like, whoever is on the bench more, it might hurt their confidence. It might make them a bit unhappy. But unfortunately for them, that's the nature of their role, right? Like no matter what, it's different. Like, yeah, Politano, Neres, now Lang, we might get another winger. But you know what? All four, let's say we have four wingers and even Raspa, who's kind of a joker in the pack, they're all going to get minutes at some point with 3 games, with Coppa Italia, Champions League, and the league. With keepers, yeah, we can rotate between games and competitions, but if a keeper starts a game, unless there's an injury, it's not like they're getting subbed on playing 30 minutes, right? So that is the unique nature of the goalkeeper role, and confidence plays a big part. At the same time, I think it's just like, look, to continue to win, you have to get better. You can't just stay the same, and we've strengthened, we had the best defense in Europe, right? Without even our best center back healthy most of last season. In other years, maybe we would have just done, okay, get rid of Marin, bring in Marianucci for Marin, who you could argue is probably an upgrade, right? And then leave it at that. But by also getting Bokuma, one of the best 3 center backs with a different characteristics as well, to bring in, it's a similar type of move where you're just getting stronger, right? And it's the same thing here. We could have just, replaced Scuffet with another veteran or younger keeper who has potential, either or, who would have been okay. It's a clear backup to Meret. But the danger with that is, with 3 competitions, what happens if Meret does get injured? And then you have to play a Champions League game and 3 days later, a big game in the league versus a big rival, let's say, and you're playing either some old guy or some kid. You know what I mean? So when you want to go deep in 3 competitions, this really makes you feel secure. And I think that I've heard so many anecdotes about Conte that he's one of the best coaches at making everyone feel important and like they play a part. And I'll never forget Conte, kept John Terry on the bench, the captain of Chelsea, because you know what? He was 36 at the time when Conte went to Chelsea. And even though he was a legend, it was, he found the formula that worked was Cahill, Luiz, Azpilicueta. And he had a conversation with Terry. He goes, as long as these guys are keeping, are playing like this, you're not really going to see the field much. But he made him feel like a part of the project. So he's done it before. I question whether beyond this season, we can, at the end of this season, will both of these guys be happy to stay? Probably not. But I do think for 1 year, we can pull this off with Conte. And just speaking about Vanja and Meret, Meret had his best ever season last year. I think most Napoli fans and the 3 of us would probably agree. He was more decisive and he had a little bit more confidence, a little bit more grit than he has in the past. And he came up big, and he's always been a great shot stopper, amazing at penalties. And like Gianluca said, he saved I think 4 penalties last year. I mean, without those, we don't win the league, right? We won by 1 point. So amazing. Good for him. And Conte brought the best out of him. But all along, since Meret has been at Napoli, I've said, without even knowing it would be Vanja coming in later, what I would love is a keeper who is more dominant in the air, who has a stronger personality. Meret is just not that strong of a personality. Someone who is intimidating, like physically and personality wise intimidating, and someone who would be a bit better on the ball. Without sacrificing, of course, number one, it's shot stopping ability. And to me, Vanja is like that. He's that. He is. Let's just say they're kind of on par shot stopping for argument's sake, right? But then he's more physically intimidating because he's bigger. He takes up more of the goal. He has a stronger personality for sure, and he's probably better on the ball. So he kind of fills the gaps in Meret's game. And that's why I think we ultimately paid the 20 million, which to me is a signal. Right now, I fully expect Meret to start the season as the starter. You can't bench the guy who just won you the Scudetto. But long term, I do see Vanja as being the starting keeper because you wouldn't spend 20 million on a guy who you just see as a backup who's 28 years old, in my opinion. But right now, we're blessed to have both. No shade on Meret, but I think that Vanja is just that one level better than Meret, in my opinion, and ultimately will be the main starter, although both can play a lot of minutes with all these competitions.
Yeah, I think you took the words from my mouth. Like, he's the ultimate insurance policy, and for the reasons you mentioned, right? Like, Meret has been injury prone, and the last thing we need is a Scuffet or a Contini playing in the Champions League. I think maybe if we still had Caprile, maybe we might not have, because he's more of a starting quality. I think we still would have considered it. And to your point, playing so many games, just the likelihood of an injury is higher. And then to your point, like for those watching on YouTube, you can see they were strong in different ways last season. What really stands out to me about Milinkovic-Savic is I'm not a big stats guy with these advanced metrics, so I had to look up what PSXG minus GA is. So what this is it's post shot XG minus goals allowed. So what that measures is like how many goals did a keeper keep out that basically should have gone in over the course of a season. And Vanya, I think, was number one in like all of Europe in this category. It was something like opposition teams over the course of the season should have scored 12 more goals, but had it not been for him. So that stands out when you talk about shot stopping. Meret is an excellent shot stopper, but probably not even as good as Vanya is. Some of these stats are hard to compare because Gianluca mentioned the defense in front of Meret, whereas sometimes that can harm a goalkeeper, sometimes that can be good for a goalkeeper in terms of the stats because like in Meret's case it's a smaller sample size, but Vanya made a lot of saves. He stopped more penalties even than Meret did last season. And then and this is something that Gianluca shared offline, but if you look at the stats from two seasons across the last two seasons, then it actually shows that Vanya can, and it's a little bit difficult to read with the colors, but it shows that Vanya can also do the things that Meret can do. So, and this addresses for the fact that, like, if you look at Meret's stats from two seasons ago, obviously we finished in 10th that season, so we got pummeled, but they were quite poor. So, again, it's that insurance policy against what if just Meret just had a great year last year and that's not something that he can sustain. Then we have this this incredible other option who could take over. And then even on the price tag, while that is a significant sum of money for a backup goalkeeper, at the same time I feel like let's say Caprile was just a Cagliari player and we wanted to go buy him, I guarantee you they would be asking for somewhere in the 12 to 15 million euro range. And so to say, we're going to pay an extra 5-6 million and get a keeper that's that much better, I don't even think that's a crazy price to pay for a backup.
No way.
Given all the other...
it's not a crazy price, but I just like we're seeing in the stats and like we've seen by actually watching the games, this guy is not he's nobody's idea of a backup. Okay, so whether on paper he starts as the backup, it's difficult for me to imagine that will just be the role that he's going to play going forward. He's just better. He was almost a one-man defense last year for Torino. They lost their best defender because we bought him, Buongiorno, right? And now that's also which other friends of ours have pointed out. That's also a reunion of Buongiorno with Milinkovic-Savic as well, who played for years together on Torino, which can't hurt.
Shout out to Michele for that one.
Exactly right. So I just think that either way we're in a good place. But I think that Meret, that was we saw his ceiling last year, right? And from what we've seen from Vanya, he's already above Meret's ceiling, and they're about the same age. So there's no way Meret is going to make up for the gap in the areas that Vanya is stronger. Even if we call them even with shot stopping, which maybe they're not even, but even if you call that dead even, it's just there's other areas to the game that are just better. And also you just gotta sometimes just forget stats. Pretend you're a striker. Who scares you more if you're approaching the goal or you're going to take a penalty? A skinny guy who's good, but is not that strong, or a friggin' guy that looks like he's a Viking or something who takes up as much of the goal as someone like Donnarumma, and he can also get down. So it's sometimes it's also just that. I would just be more intimidated by going up against Vanya. Frankly, you get past the best defense in Europe and you got that guy standing there. It's like, come on.
It's crazy. He's also a bit larger than Meret physically, aside from just the build, the body type. Just characteristic wise, when you're building a keeper, that's kind of the type you want to build. A gigantic monster in the goal who's crazy reach, does not hesitate, is not scared of jumping up to grab the ball. This guy is the full package. And if you really ask me, 22 million for a proven goalie of his quality is honestly a steal. And anybody in their right mind, any outside of Italy soccer fan, if you watch Vanya's highlight reel from last year, and you say Champions of Italy just added this guy, like they're gonna be like, wow, like this is a problem. Like this is a quality signing, and like there's just too much, you know, too much of a spotlight on Merit's career when he's faced up against competition. Um, where it'll be interesting to see how this goes. Where if everyone's able to stay healthy, and like you said, regardless which way it goes, we're in a good position. Let's say Milinkovic comes out on top, and God forbid something happens to him where he gets hurt, we still have Meret. So I think we're in a great spot.
Yeah, and going back to the finances as well, the fact that Meret his transfer fee has long since been paid off. So you can envision a scenario where obviously Milinkovic-Savic's transfer fee will be amortized over the term of his contract. You can envisage a scenario where Vanja overtakes Meret. Meret's not happy. He wants to be a number one, requests a transfer, and now whatever you sell Meret for is pure profit, and that'll easily cover at least a good portion, if not all, of the transfer fee we paid for Vanya. So it's actually could be a very forward looking kind of acquisition. The other thing, even though Vanya's pass completion rate is unusually low for some reason, I mean, again, it could be just because he's playing for Torino and who knows. I don't know if you guys have watched or seen this, but he can play a goal kick and like hit the target for how long he can play the ball. And I wonder if with that's just another weapon now that we have a bit more pace in the team with a guy like Noah Lang. Obviously, David Neres is very quick. And by the way, we didn't mention it in the first segment there, but Neres has looked probably like the best player in training so far. He looks really, really good. And Conte's been playing him more on the right side, which we'll get to that when we get to our lineups. But I think that could be another kind of added weapon, if you will, is just Milinkovic-Savic's long ball. Let's move on to the other big story in the Mercato. We're not going to cover everything, but that is the left wing position. And we learned today, again, we're recording on Monday, that it looks like Dan Ndoye is not going to happen. He's going to head to the Premier League. So that's a bit unfortunate because, you mentioned, Gianluca, like if, other fans or players on other teams are looking at Napoli and saying, oh my God, these guys they're already the champions. And now they added Milinkovic-Savic, it would have been a same or even more dramatic response, I think, if we added Dan Ndoye. That's not going to happen. And, we can talk about the variety of alternatives. Are you guys disappointed that we couldn't land Ndoye? Maybe I'll go to Vin first on this.
Yes and no. Yes, because I think Conte wanted him, and he was pretty much a guarantee in the sense that he knows the league, and you'd be bringing in someone who's already does a lot of the off the ball work as well, which Conte expects from a winger. So I think that for someone like Ndoye, it would have been a very easy transition on paper. At least you never know how things work out, but I would expect him to just be able to come in and play left wing right away. Maybe need a little bit less of the working in process that Conte put someone like Neres through, for example. Most players, they have to kind of develop a bit under Conte. And I think Ndoye was a little bit more ready-made in that sense, just because he knows the league and he does do a lot of the defending and running up and down the field and stuff like that. At the same time, if a player doesn't really want to be on this Napoli team, no matter how good they are, I don't want them. Okay? Because like we said earlier, what do all those guys, and we signed a lot of guys, what did they all have in common? Whether they're Kevin De Bruyne or Noah Lang, they all prioritize Napoli. Noah Lang said that he pushed to come in January and his team wouldn't let him. So he was dying to come to Napoli. De Bruyne, we know, had a lot of options, came to Napoli. Luca just waited, until we settled on him. He just waited, wanted to come. So Bokuma, same thing. He pushed. So all of these guys really want to be on Napoli, and I only want people with that same energy. I don't want to pay 45 million for a guy who comes in and he's like reluctant because maybe he would have rather been in the Prem. So you know what? It's just not meant to be. And to me, it's like, it sucks. At the same time, we already got a great left winger in Noah Lang, in my opinion, who has a lot of potential. In many ways, maybe he's already better than Ndoye in an attacking sense. Obviously, he hasn't played in Serie A, but his numbers are better. And eye test wise, I think he's at least on par, if not more natural in terms of taking on his man and all that. Where I think he might lack is I think he's going to need to be worked in to build up his physicality and build up that off the ball stuff, which Ndoye already had. But look, 45 million, I think we can find another winger if we really want out there for that amount or less, who won't be far off of Ndoye and who will actually want to be a part of Napoli. And then another aside is that, you know, a lot of people are looking at this as like ultimately, finally, the Kvara replacement, especially if we consider Neres moving more to the right, right? But it's like, even if we sign 2 left wingers, another factor is that De Bruyne, albeit not a left winger and older, is kind of the Kvara replacement in the sense that a world-class player who can contribute goals and assists and bring that creativity factor that Kvara had more on a wing. It's a different
I'd even
position.
argue that Scott was the replacement
I was going to say
last
the
year,
same thing.
mid-season.
Scott,
That space opened up there where now the field wasn't lopsided, where they're double teaming the left side, and he was able to find so much space there and
definitely,
kind of opened the field up.
I
know what
that,
you mean,
and,
though.
And
like
I love Scott, but Scott, and he's I just got his kit. It's coming in. I love McFradema. He's he's a legend now for us. But I'm saying, if you just look at like more, Kvara brought more creativity. Scott is less creative. He's more direct, right? And to me, De Bruyne, I mean, some people, a lot of Serie A fans, that not you guys, but a lot of people just haven't watched that much of him because maybe they don't follow the Premier. Like, we're talking about a guy who has the record of the most assists ever in a season in the Prem. Okay, I think it's like 16 assists or something like that. This guy is this uber creative, and he's a footballing genius. So in terms of just we lost a world class, potentially creative genius player in Kvara, and we're bringing in De Bruyne. Plus, we're adding Lang. Plus, we might get another winger. So I think you could almost look at those 3, Lang, whoever else we sign, plus KDB as almost the combined Kvara replacement.
That's what I think.
In a way. Yeah.
It's the project. It's like, he's out. Like, we're no longer a focal point team. We're an oiled machine where if you take one out and you put another one in, it's still moving the same way. And it's not a completely different shape or look. Like, and that's like kind of the Conte effect. You saw that when he left Inter. Inzaghi inherited a well-oiled machine, and he was able to build on it.
And the last thing I'll add with regard to Ndoye is just, now we're hearing all these rumors about who else we're going to get instead of Ndoye, right? And to me, I just look at it as kind of 2 categories, because I'm not super familiar with all of them, right? You either have like the guys who are similar to Ndoye in the sense that they're young, they have a high ceiling, and we hear players like Nusa or Kevin and others. And then you have more like veterans who are a bit past their best, who are more coming in, to me, like who would be like a real backup and can be a project, almost like how Spinazzola was, that Conte get them back to their best. And that's more like the Sterling or Sancho or Grealish or even Chiesa. So I find it's like those 2 categories. And for me, it's like, I would prefer, the younger category of player who we spend a bit more on, but they have a higher ceiling. But if we bring in a vet, then it's just like, to me, it's just like, okay, then they're more in a backup role, and maybe we'll use that money somewhere else. So it's going to be interesting to see which of those 2 directions we go, rather than which specific player, in a way.
On the point of flexibility, we also still have Neres, even though it seems like Conte wants him to play on the right. If he's going to be a backup, we know he can play on the left because he did it last season. We still have Spinazzola, who's kind of maybe like a last resort option if we really need to lean on someone. So we have a lot of flexibility in the team. And then just in terms of the backup options and the types, I've also read that Conte wants to have on both sides a skill player and like a more hardworking type. And knowing the way Conte plays, especially when we have a lead, you can see why, right? Like, even Noah Lang acknowledged himself that like he's clearly super confident in his attacking abilities, and I think that's really important. And actually, I would suggest like I have more confidence in Lang contributing goals and assists than I do in Ndoye. Because Ndoye, like it
Yeah.
took him a while to start scoring. Anyone who's played Fantacalcio probably knows this, but it took him a while. Then once he got going, he started scoring a lot more, but it's a pretty small sample size, whereas Lang has contributed goals pretty much throughout his career wherever he's been. He's acknowledged though that where he needs to improve, and Vin, you alluded to this in terms of building up his physical strength, is on the defensive side of the ball, and that's where it helps to have even like a Spinazzola who you can bring on to play now more like a wing back, more defensive role to protect the lead. So that I think will also factor in terms of who we go after as a backup. Gianlu, is there any of those names stand out to you as one you like? I think Nusa is a really intriguing one. Um, whether that or not that happens, but any of those names you prefer?
For me, I definitely prefer Nusa, and to Vince's point, like I want guys that want to be on Napoli. I want guys that want to be part of the project. So with Ndoye, the disappointment that I have is just nothing to do with the team. It's just in the fact that it wasn't meant to be, I guess. But I think Nusa could be a guy that fills. He seems like a cookie cutter in Ndoye, like a very similar profile type of player. And it'll be interesting because, like you said, with Conte's desire to want attacker and defender for both sides of the wing. If let's say Neres is on the right, okay, Politano, Neres, check, done. We have Lang. Is Nusa that type of player? I don't know 100%. Is Sancho or Sterling? No. Is Grealish? I don't know. But if I'm going to go into that pool, like Vince said, the the seniors pool or whatever you want to call it, I would go Grealish only because I feel like that guy, maybe this might be silly or of me or naive, but like he could look at a guy like Scott and see like I was at a higher point in my career than Scott ever was on United while I was in City. I could probably come out better than I was then if I get on this team, right? Like who knows? But I'd like Nusa. I think now that Ndoye is out the window, good riddance, good luck, enjoy England. I would go Nusa. Chiesa could stay put, not touching that, not with a 10-foot stick.
Good man, good man.
And outside of that, like I said, just Nusa, and I would do Grealish, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's some other names we hear about, this week.
Well, I heard Lauriente today, which is an intriguing one at Sassuolo.
That was I feel like a curveball because it's just like like you hearing all these names, like these flashy names,
now it's
and then
the
it's like
media just
Lauriente, and it's like whoa, what?
You know who it might be hard to get because he's captain of Lazio, but he's almost in between those two categories because he's 30, but he's not past his best. Is Zaccagni. If you want to bring in someone who knows the league, will put in the work, and pretty much is a guarantee, and also isn't a project where we have to resuscitate him, then that's great because it's almost like he can go in, he can start, and then you develop Lang, make Lang be the Neres of beginning of last season, come on the last 20, 30 minutes and bring the magic. And then maybe slowly over the years, maybe Lang can, Lang can overtake him once he learns that other side of the game. So I would love, if we're not going to get, a Nusa, I would much prefer Zaccagni. I just don't know how realistic that is. Or maybe it's like Lazio like Raspa, but do we want to trade, a young guy like Raspa who has a lot to give for Zaccagni, who's older? Zaccagni tactically is a better fit for our system in terms of he's a left winger and Raspa isn't. But at the same time, Raspa has a higher ceiling, maybe a player plus money. I'm just curious, but reading all these names, we don't. It could be one of the 6-7 guys we've heard or nobody.
Yeah.
We'll see. I just wanted to bring that up because he's almost the one guy who's kind of right in between those two categories in a sense.
He'd be perfect fit, and it would be like a Politano on the left side for us in a way.
But better.
But better.
I love Politano, but he's more
The only
attacking.
thing that concerns me is injury issues. As Joe will tell you, this is not to flaunt or anything. I won Fanteli Gaucho, and Zaccagni was a member of the winning squad. And the only thing is he does get hurt. And the other side of that coin is like you said, Lazio's transfer issues. The one reason why I'm like really now more on the let's nail Raspa down to Napoli is because you never know what can happen in the season. All these games now that we do have this deep situation at forwards, we can alter formations and play a 2-striker, formation with Raspa, Luca, and you still have Lukaku for the next game to start and go full 90. So, it'll definitely be fun to see how it shapes out.
100%. I think regardless, once we get to talking about the formations and stuff later, we might agree, we might disagree on stuff, but I think we all will acknowledge, especially after seeing last season and seeing all the different pieces we're bringing in, we will have maybe a standard setup, but things are going to be even more fluid than they were last year, and which is amazing because then we're going to keep teams guessing.
Yeah. Last thing I'll say, well, quickly on Zaccagni, I think that transfer situation at Lazio is what's going to make that deal really, really difficult. But who knows? If Sarri loses his mind and actually signs Insigne, who knows? Maybe.
Special cigarette for Sarri.
Yeah. But I think for that reason, it's probably really unlikely. But the last thing I'll say about Ndoye is that it's really hard for me to swallow paying something like, I think Bologna want 45 million euros for this guy when Inter's about to get Ademola Lookman for like 43. That's
it's the only difference I'll say is Lookman's 4 or 5 years older.
Yeah.
I think that's really what it is. And what you're doing when you're buying Ndoye is you're buying not just the player he is, but the player he could be.
Yeah, sure.
But that's a risk. Whereas Lookman is more of a guarantee, but he's right in his prime. So he might be better. He might be better right now, but in 3-4 years, Ndoye could explode and then be someone who you can then sell for 80.
Yeah, but I'd rather.
But he also could not. Yeah.
Yeah, given that we already got Lang, which is kind of like the same type of bet, right?
Exactly.
Do you want to get 2 guys that you're betting on, or one sure thing and one kind of risk? But you mentioned the lineup, so let's close with that. Now, before we even have this discussion, let me just add some qualifications here, because this is there are so many. This is just a fun hypothetical thing we're gonna do, which is we're gonna pick our starting our best 11s, let's say, if the season were to start tomorrow. Now, a few things here. One, the Mercato there's a long way to go, so players can come, players can go, and that will obviously change who starts and who doesn't. 2, players get injured. I mean, right now, if we were to actually say tomorrow, I mean, we'll get to it. We probably all have Buongiorno in our starting 11, even though he's actually hurt right now. But so obviously injuries can affect who makes it into the starting 11. And then there's the fact that, and there's probably other factors as well, but all the matches we're going to be playing are going to require us to rotate. So you might look at this as, maybe you consider this the way I put it to Vin was if you had to pick your best 11, who would it be? You might look at it as if you were playing against a top club, who would you put in your starting 11? But obviously there are so many circumstances that are going to change, who makes it into the starting 11. But with that being said, let's do that. And let's pick our starting 11s. And I'm going to start with Gianluca.
Drum
with your start.
roll.
Meret.
Right.
That's it.
Yes.
11
the teams. All right, so we got our boy Vanja in goal. We got Capitano over there on the right, and we got Amir in the middle. And for now, obviously Buongiorno's hurt, but Bukema in that spot, I guess, put a slash. We got Hassan the depth. Wow, I'm seeing that. So in the mid, we got a little diamond situation going. So like Joe said, playing to win it all. So you want to have best quality out there. And we got Lobo sitting deep, kind of like almost like a stopper to Amir. So making up for that 3-man defense, and plus, Devo's going to be running around like a madman. Then we got Scott and KDB and Gisa in that 3 front line. So for me, KDB sitting behind Lukaku, scary sight. And then you also got Scott overlapping and Neres over there on the left wing, and Politano on the right wing. Who knows with the Politano situation? Maybe that gets better. Maybe Neres ends up starting there, and we see Lang or whoever else we might end up signing. But this definitely, for me, is a lineup that if you're playing FIFA, you could definitely be happy, and you definitely have a lot of firepower going forward. That's for sure.
Yeah, I can see this. So for those watching on YouTube, I just threw some depth options in text below the starters, which really highlights the areas we need to improve, because my depth midfielders are Vergara and Hassa. So, but that actually also raises a concern for me. I think you can, I called this a 3-4-3 with a diamond midfield. The risk with this one, I think, though, is that you don't really have depth at midfield because you're playing your 4
This
big
is playing
guys.
for it all. This is like a Champions League final.
Exactly. Yeah.
Everything.
Unless we get a guy like Miretti, then that's actually legitimate depth. But I think Juve is going to ask for too much money for him. And then, there's also like that backup left winger that we seem like we're going to get someone that would obviously slot in. And, guys like Mazzocchi or Simeone are probably going to leave. But the reason I wanted you to go first of all, Vin cheated and sent 2.
I was going to send a backup, but the way I looked at it, it was like, I'm just going to do this because then I could play with it. I'll play with it all day.
It was hard for me not to send 3. It was hard for me not to send 3. So,
but it's what's really interesting though, and I'll go to Vin's first one, is he actually has a very similar midfield. So I think you guys might be onto something here. So Vin, why don't you walk through your first option?
Yeah. So basically, I'm going to be honest. I think we're going to line up, at least on paper, more as a 4-3-3. But what I'm bullish on is that while I think we're going to switch through many formations, including perhaps a 3-5-2 or 3-4-3, I do think that I think that we're basing it on a 4-man defense. Although that is not the Conte way in the past, I think the way he's calculating it is that it's going to be a 4-man backline as the first choice, in my opinion, although we can switch to 3 at any point. So bearing that in mind, in this version, obviously my backup to Bukama would be Rachmani, and I just swapped them. In one I have Bukama and one I have Rachmani. To me, they're A and B. You can just kind of switch them in either game. They're both starting level.
It looks like I missed Rachmani.
Yeah. So I would have, Rachmani, Bukama could be either one. Bukama is better on the ball. Rachmani, is a part of this team. So, so we have basically, the kind of back 4 that picks itself with just either Bukama or Rachmani, but the back 4 that we've come to know. And then, when it comes to the midfield, the reason probably why Gianluca and I both chose to include De Bruyne as well as the 3 midfielders from last year is just that it's difficult for me to think of a way that you can bench one of Zambo, Lobo, or McTominay in a big game. And it's also difficult for me to think that, you're not going to want De Bruyne to start important games. So the one way is to have all 4 is to play with De Bruyne more as a 10. Or I could have also listed this because many times Man City on paper lined up with De Bruyne listed as a winger. So you could call it a 4-3-3 with De Bruyne as a winger, but really De Bruyne is that guy who has freedom, right?
He
so he could be a number 10 on paper. He can be a winger on paper. The point is he's going to go. I want De Bruyne to be more in the attacking third, even though he can go deep and dictate, because what we have that solid base, we have that midfield, and then you add him into the mix for the attack and bring that creativity, not make him have to defend as much. And then with the front two, right now I think that the best second striker / winger we have, especially in terms of direct play, is Neres, and then Lukaku. But that could be Lang Lukaku, it could be Raspa Lukaku, it could be Politano Lukaku. Although in this formation, I think we were going to want someone who's more direct and more attacking. So that's kind of why it came to this. And in terms of midfield depth, the thing is like, I don't look at it like that, because I think, like, let's say De Bruyne starts in this formation, right? When you sub out De Bruyne, you don't have to put on a midfielder. You can put on Politano and you go 4-3-3, right? Or you put on Lang and you go 4-3-3. So De Bruyne is that interesting player where you can count him as one of the three midfield. You can count him as a midfielder, or you can count him as an attacker. He's really kind of that hybrid where he can kind of be listed as both. And so you can then choose to sub him for a midfielder or a winger, depending on what you need at that point in the game. And vice versa, if he starts on the bench, then you can sub him on, let's say we need a goal and we're playing 4-3-3. We need a goal, takes out Zambo out, throw him on for a midfielder because we just want as many attacking guys on as at once. Or if you want to put him on, but you don't want to take that risk, you take off Politano and you throw on KDB and you say, okay, you go in around. So he offers that flexibility, and it doesn't necessarily affect the midfield depth, because you can then sub him with someone in attack, if you get what I'm saying.
That's why I shorted Oliveira in my lineup, because my thought process is like, all right, like if you're going to pull any midfielder or any player, you could pretty much throw in Oliveira and just change the shape of the team completely.
Yeah, there's a few things I really like, Vin, about this, what we're calling a 4-4-2 with a diamond midfield. One is the one you mentioned about, even though it looks like there's no left winger, not only can De Bruyne play that role, but like we talked about before, McTominay can too. And the two of them, I think, are both intelligent enough to play off of each other. And if one goes, the other stays, or vice versa. I think they can build that chemistry. The second thing I like about it is I think Lukaku and Neres together as a front two can be killer, because of the combination of Lukaku's hold-up play and Neres' pace. And who knows, we might get a Luda, I guess, if you
Exactly.
like instead of Lula. And then the third thing I like about it is I think this gives Raspadori the most potential to play, because I've shown him as the backup to De Bruyne here, but he could also be the backup to Neres as part of that front two. He could play as a number 10, however you want to look at it. And while it looks odd that I have kind of like Lang as the backup to Neres, really what that represents is a change in formation when he comes on, like Vince.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And to your point with the flexibility up top, we're thinking of Neres more playing on the right, but we know he can play on the left. So with De Bruyne given that freedom, we know that if, let's say, De Bruyne shifts to the right, that Neres can go to the left, and so that there's almost up front, you're just confusing the defenses, because you have these guys who are tactically versatile, but you have the anchor of a Lukaku or Luka. So you have these two, basically you're going to have two either wingers or a winger and number 10 or second striker number 10, whatever you want to call them. These two creative players, one maybe more direct, one more creative, but you have Lukaku or Luka there to kind of anchor that and to be that focal point. And so because you have such a strong focal point, and this is why Conte likes this type of striker, you can then get creative with the guys around or behind them, because they kind of allows that. If you don't have that type of striker, then it would be harder to pull something like this kind of versatility off, in my opinion. And both Lukaku and Luka can do that.
It's so they're scary perfect. When you see, let's say, Milinkovic-Savic launch a ball from goal kick. Lukaku holds it up, dishes it to De Bruyne, and he's just looking on who to nail this ball to, whether it's Scott, Lang, Neres, Politano, and it's going to be crazy. I'm telling you, it's going to be a sight to behold. I can't wait.
Yeah. Now, Vin, you mentioned earlier that you think a 4-3-3 is probably more likely. I think a good way to put it is that this is the type of formation we might expect to see a little bit deeper into the season, once these guys are fully fit in terms of as Conte defines it. They've trained hard in their roles. But prior to that, it's probably more likely that we'll stick to what we know and what worked well last season, and that was the 4-3-3, which is a good segue to the other option that you provided.
Right. So I have here the exact same base, except here because I knew I was throwing up two formations, I figured one I would put Bokuma, one I would put Rachmani, just to show you that I find them to be very interchangeable. And then if we're doing a midfield three, then you would have to choose. Do you want KDB or Zambo? You could also swap them for McTominay and stuff, but I think it's more you choose. Do you want creativity and attacking intent, or do you want that solid base of Zambo, and you can have one or the other?
Yeah, and you did, and just for the viewers and the listeners, I showed KDB here, but you did say either him or Anguissa, and I think that will also depend on the opponent, right?
The cool thing is you can do Zambo for 60 minutes and De Bruyne for the last 30, or vice versa. And you can
crazy.
Which is great. And then up front, I just put right now who I think are the most informed three. But to start the season, I wouldn't also be shocked if Politano gets a start. But I think right now that's an amazing front three. Another thing though too is that with that versatility, we said you could do what we said before, which is have Zambo and then De Bruyne on a wing as well. So it's really great. But I do think if we're sticking to the 4-3-3 and really trying to remain faithful to that formation, then you basically have to choose between one of the midfield three who won us the Scudetto and KDB, if you're counting KDB as a midfielder. And I think that's fine, because Zambo is an incredible player. Conte loves him, and I find it difficult to imagine he's going to be that much of like a bench player. But you can have that look where you if it's a big game, maybe you start with Zambo, save De Bruyne, bring him on and play the last 30 minutes, or vice versa. You start De Bruyne, you're up 2 goals, boom, take De Bruyne off, give him a rest, bring in Zambo, hold the fourth down. It's so flexible. But I do think that this formation and the other one, which are very similar, with just basically a small tweak, to be the base. Though I do imagine that at times we can go to a 3 at the back system. That's the amazing thing about all these options we have. You couple that with the versatility that Conte has shown and the intelligence of the players who have already shown that they can adapt. Then you add in all these other guys who can come in and give a different look. And I think we're going to be amazingly unpredictable. And there's going to be so many options where, oh man, team sitting back, we can't crack the code. We have so many different looks. We can then go to the bench and bring on this guy or that guy, change things up, change formation mid-game. And that's the beautiful thing about what we're building here. And I think, a lot of people have given Conte crap in the past for the fact that he doesn't like to rotate that much, but it's rare that he's been given a squad where you have these kind of backups who are not actually backups. Coaches always say that, no one's a backup. I look at them all as stars, but we're getting to a point now with some of these positions where you actually can say that there is no backup. Even with keeper, you could say they're both keepers could start for any team in the top 4 in the Serie A. So it's amazing, and I think that is going to allow Conte to show something different, especially when it comes to Europe. I think he's always been stuck with that 3-5-2 in the past in Europe, which maybe doesn't work as well. But now with the versatility we have, being able to play a back 4 and having someone like KDB in your team with all these different styles of wingers and stuff, it's really incredible. And we're going to potentially be able to do a real masterclass and see the ultimate of Conte, because of the fact that we're giving him these tools. It's like you have an amazing, what is it called? Conductor. And now you're adding violins, brass, horns, this, that. He can play any kind of symphony he wants, and even mid-game change it up. So regardless of who's right when it comes to these formations. And, we all know that they're going to change throughout the year. The point with that Gianluca made, that you're making, that I'm making, is that there's no wrong answers here because of the market we're having and the team that we're building, which is honestly, it's a blessing. We've even without the Ndoye piece and maybe another midfielder piece, this is by far the deepest and most versatile squad that Napoli has ever had, in my opinion.
No question.
Yeah, and on the point about playing three at the back is definitely going to be an option, because it looks like we're going to have 5 center backs now. Okay, Juan Jesus, who knows? He missed some time with injury last year. That's a big risk at his age. But we also have Oliveira, who played at center back as well. So I don't think that's
and Dilo
and Di Lorenzo, exactly, who's done it with Napoli and with the national team. So yeah, I think the key takeaway before I get to my boring lineup is that flexibility is certainly going to be an advantage for us this season. I think for me, this is not even really what I would consider our best 11. It's more what I think we'll start the season with.
You benched
and
KDB.
I don't have KDB in my starting 11, but to my previous point, I think to start the year, we'll do what we did last year, just because these guys are already drilled to play this system. It's we're not going to lose to Hellas Verona on the first game of the season, and then as guys get to fitness and have spent, like, what a luxury now that we have so many players that we can just hold off and not start Kevin De Bruyne or even Noah Lang. Like, it could well be Neres playing at left wing to start the season until Conte is fully comfortable with them being trained to play the roles that they need to play. And then we start to evolve the formation into what the ideal formation ends up being. So just for those that are listening, I just went with a classic 4-3-3. I put Meret in goal for the same reason, and Ben mentioned it earlier. Like, he's probably going to start the season just because he's the Scudetto winning goalkeeper. He won 2 in the last 3 seasons. And then as the season progresses, he may lose that spot to Milinkovic-Savic. A back 4 of Di Lorenzo, Rachmani, Buongiorno, and Oliveira. And if Buongiorno's not fit, then you can slot Pokemon in there. Lobotka in the Regista with Ngisa and McTominay on either side of him. And then the front 3 of Lukaku, Politano, and like I said, I have no Lang, but could well be Neres there as well. Like I said, I think this is what we'll start the season with, but probably it'll change as we progress and start playing in multiple competitions and start rotating. Yeah, go ahead, Gianluca.
So this is what we'll start the season with, but what is your team to win it all? Is it
I agree, by the way.
I was trying to avoid it. No, I mean, I think to your points, both of you, like you both tried really hard to get De Bruyne into the starting 11, because how could you not have a player of that quality, in the starting 11? And that's why
I don't know how Conte is going to do it. I feel like
yeah,
this is like we had arguably the best midfield in Italy, right? Like, from as biased as my opinion might be, you look at our midfield in regards to the quality that each of them bring. It is a star-studded midfield. We've just added De Bruyne. How the hell do you figure that out?
Yeah, but the thing is like, you can take 2 approaches. One is, like I said, you keep De Bruyne on the bench and bring him on for a midfielder or an attacker. But the thing that's
crazy, right? Like Napoli bringing De Bruyne on from the bench, like just like saying that out loud is like.
Well, I think it's really going to be, when the games are thick and fast, right? That's what I'm thinking. I'm not. Joel's right. This is much more likely to start the season. But let's say you have a game every 3 days. You don't want a 34-year-old De Bruyne playing 90 minutes two times in 3 days, right?
No, of course.
When that's the case, then you choose. Okay, in one game he's going to play 60, 70 minutes from the start, right? And then get subbed off towards the end, or even play the full game if we need him. And in the other one, he's your guy to come on the last 30 minutes and break.
But that's true. Like
down.
Conte said in his press conference, even though old Christian Kivu took away from it was a slogan, he did mention other, great tidbits. And one of them was like, there is no set lineup for this squad with the amount of games that we're playing. Let's say in the case of Anguissa KDB, because that feels like the most puzzle piece that you could switch out. Anguissa starts, let's say, against Atalanta in the league. KDB comes in the last 20, 30. We play Champions League against whoever the hell it is, and KDB starts that game. And then also too, like, crazy things happen. Guys get tweaks in warm-ups and stuff. We have a four-man like stud option at midfield, and then you got Gilmore in the rafters. Like, I'm just like saying from like the just like the from the outside looking in, like it's such a luxury.
I do think though in a hypothetical, CL big game or like versus a top team, not in the beginning of the season, let's say mid-season, you got to play the midfield that won you the Scudetto and KDB from the start, in which case that's when I think we're going to get
shake off Politano or Neto.
Yeah, that's when you're going to get to playing more that kind of that 4-4-2, if you want to call it 4-4-2 hybrid. Basically, the beautiful thing is, and this is what I think that we have to train our minds to think, at least this is my perspective, is for the game, for today's game, do we want to think of KDB as a midfielder or as one of the three attackers?
Because I consider him as an attacker. To me, he's not going box to box like the other guys.
Well, not like the other guys, but what I'm saying is you can count him as either or positionally, so that if you don't want to sacrifice the solidity, you add him as an attacker and you have one less winger. But if you're facing a team like Monza we faced, it was so hard to crack the goal, right? Or a Parma or a team like that, then maybe knowing that you have a big game versus a tough team that weekend, what you say, Zambo, you rest, because we've also seen that Zambo can lose a bit of his power when he plays a lot, right? And you say, okay, KDB, you start as a midfielder, and we trust the solidity of this back line and to have that extra creativity to break down. And then once we're up a couple of goals, because we're totally overwhelming them with KDB and McTominay bombing forward with these two wingers, but then after that, then last 30 minutes bring on Zambo, for example,
coffee,
right?
And relax.
So that's the cool thing. KDB, it's not me coming up with this. Just Google lineups of Man City over the last 10 years. He's played as a striker even. So he's played on paper. He's been listed as the number 9. He's been listed as the winger, and he's been listed as a mezzala. So he's a genius in terms of football brain, and positionally he can play anywhere. But I think we all agree we don't want him to have to do that much defending. Mm-hmm. But sometimes when you're facing an opposition who you're going to be playing the whole game in their half of the field, there's no better player to have in the world than KDB.
Yeah.
Right? To break down those defenses. He's the most creative player out there. And one thing I will say is I think we had the perfect balance midfield last year, right? But one thing everyone agreed that Napoli lacked, especially after Kvara left, was creativity, right? And KDB is pure creativity. So regardless of where he's playing, he's adding the one thing that midfield lacked, right? So it's really cool. But I think that fitting him in is going to be easier than we think, because it's going to be, do we play him as a midfielder or do we play him as an attacker? And you can fit him in either role depending on who you're facing.
Yeah, and his IQ is so high that it allows you to put him in like those fluid type of roles where everyone else on the field, your role remains the same, but he's able to kind of just find himself in between the lines. Like if, like you said, we pull a winger and you have him kind of free roaming a little bit behind Lukaku with Scott overlapping, it's going to be really fun. I can't wait.
2 more points. Sorry if I'm going on too much here, but
That's okay.
the thing is we know that McTominay is a workhorse, right? I mean, obviously, I hope he gets a little bit more rest this year, but he played 90 minutes every game, right? Likewise, Lobotka, other than when he was injured, right? Zambo has always been that guy who he's amazing, right? But he can drop off even in a game, right? And KDB is older and has had his injury issues. So this allows us to be able to manage, although they're completely different profiles, maybe now with this depth, we can manage both of them where we don't want either of those guys to having to play 90 minutes that much. So this way you can keep both of them fresh. And that's a beautiful thing. You can manage them better. Conte last year had no choice. So even if a guy was kind of cooked, we had to play him because who were we going to play? We just didn't have the depth. We had Gilmore playing, and that's another factor. Gilmore can play for Lobotka or in the midfield as you could even do a double playmaker. This is where the team, the flexibility. You could do Gilmore Lobotka as a 4-2, and then you could do a 3. You could do Neres. Let's say Scott's out. You can do 4-2-3-1. Neres, KDB, Politano. Or Lang, KDB, Neres, Lukaku. I mean, we have this is great. But the last point I wanted to make is we've been seeing all these mock lineups by non-Napoli fans, and the one thing most of them have in common is they dropped Lobotka and had Zambo, KDB, McTominay. But the three of us, we chose 3 different formations. Joe was thinking more at the start of the season. Me and you were thinking more mid-season, whatever. None of us drop Lobotka, and no Napoli fan who knows anything would drop Lobotka because this guy is not going anywhere. And if he is dropped, it's probably going to be for Gilmore, who plays the same position. So anyone out there who's thinking we're going to go with no regista, unless maybe in certain circumstances, okay, I'll give that. But from the start is out to lunch. And I've seen even people who are on TV who are supposed to be Italian football experts who drop Lobotka in their lineup. And I think that's ridiculous. Conte played Lobotka when he went in. He could barely, we risked him, and he could only play. He could only play 10 minutes. And it
truly shows just how little people actually watch Napoli play, unless it's against the Juventus or Inter or Milan or whatever.
Yeah.
But also Joe's lineup, like how you said, mine and yours was more mid-season. Joe made his lineup 2 days ago before we added a new goalie, so I think that might have been.
No. I made this today.
Dude, for all we know, we brought how
2 days ago.
How long is it till the start of the season? Like 4 or 5 weeks?
Yeah, I think
for all we know, Vanja might
maybe.
scare. Meret might request to move before the season starts. Then we got to.
Crazy.
Vanja might scare him in training and be like, "Okay, I'm not playing that much."
Del Sangro and Meret's going to be next to him, and he's going to be like, "Oh,
yeah." Exactly.
Yeah. But I think that the key to make all of this work is the fact that we're playing so many games, and we will rotate, and like no one will be starving for minutes, and then it's just a matter of customizing the lineup to the opponent. And the one what's interesting, really interesting about this new Champions League format is that because of how many teams are in the competition, which frankly I don't like, I think it's too many games, clubs will choose to play call it their B team in the Champions League on occasion because you're playing like some, I don't know, Turkish club or whatever, when you might have maybe not that one, but whereas you might have a tougher opponent in Serie A that week. So I think that's going to be the key. And then the other thing I'll say just before we wrap it up is that I think one guy who deserves a ton of credit and is probably not getting the praises now and maybe will later in the season, depending on how things go, is Giovanni Manna, because to be able to pull this off, okay, granted, I don't think any sporting director of Napoli has ever been given this much budget and freedom and all of this stuff, but we've never seen Napoli be this prepared for the start of a season in terms of the mercato and just getting guys for the prices we want to get them for. And sometimes like we may look back at Ndoye and say like that was a good transfer to not make, right? Just when you look at the price tag and all the other factors. So I did want to just give Giovanni Manna a shout out there. But guys, it was a long pod, but it was, I think, an enjoyable one. So let's wrap it up there. I want to thank both of you for coming on. Vincenzo, thank you so much.
It's always a pleasure, Joe. Thanks so much for being back, and we're so excited for now this new format going into the season. You know, Napoli added the X factor of De Bruyne, and Forza Napoli podcast has added the X factor of YouTube video. It's just like they're hand in hand, that the club is progressing and the podcast is progressing. So it's a beautiful to see this symbiotic growth.
Thank you, Gianluca. I don't know how you're gonna top that one, but
What Vin said, everything Vin said. No, it's always a pleasure, and you know, honestly, like Vin said, it's definitely nice to be on the new platform, and so it's definitely fun. People could see all of our crazy reactions and my reaction to Joe putting Meret in the lineup, but it was a great time as always.
yeah, knowing my luck, like Elon will buy YouTube and close it down or something. Right?
Oh,
It
geez.
took too long to start it, but you can find Vincenzo on X at VinB Napoli. You can find Gianluca at Gianluca617, and you can find me at Joe_Fischetti5 or at Forza Napoli Pod. If you are listening to the audio version and you want to see the visuals that we discussed, whether it was some of the stats on the goalkeepers or predicted lineups for this season, head on over to YouTube, Forza Napoli Podcast, and be sure to like and subscribe. That helps to get the word out. And I don't know, I'm too old for this stuff, but there's some YouTube algorithms that makes this stuff go around. So head on over there, and I will be back soon. I haven't exactly decided when the next episode will be, but probably at some point during the ritiro at Castel di Sangro. I think we have 3 friendlies there, so as we get closer to the season, we'll probably do a very similar episode where we'll catch up on how things are going at training, as well as any kind of final transfers before we head into the start of the season. But until then, I'm Joe Fischetti. Forza Napoli sempre.